to do here is kind of give you a preview of the presentation that I'm going to give to the Friday group about artificial intelligence. And started with this quote from Werner Vinge, which he says that we are on the edge of change comparable to the rise of human life on Earth. All right, that's how significant artificial intelligence is expected to be. And we're going to talk about why people think that and who thinks that. Right? Let's talk about that right now. Let's look at there are 3 levels of artificial intelligence. All right. Level number 1, which is called narrow artificial intelligence, which means that intelligence is specialized in one area. That's where the computer can beat us in a game of chess, or right now in Go and in other areas. But that same computer, working the same algorithms, can't really go beyond that particular task. However, once we get to AGI, which is called general AI, then the computer itself is expected to be as smart as a human across the board, right? So it's able to do things. So you don't have to have 25 computers all doing each one particular task. You can have one computer that can do multiple tasks similar to a human being. When you get to the 3rd level, ASI, it's super intelligence, and that means that the computer will actually be smarter than the best human in practically everything. And we're going to talk about these 3 levels, what they mean, risk that they bring about, and other things. Now, Larry, you're going to notice that this is not going to take that long, this whole thing, because we're not going to have any questions and answers as we go through it, because I'm just showing it to you. First thing we want to talk about is our distorted view of intelligence. All right. And, we look at it as AI intelligence right now is down there somewhere between the ant and the bird. And so we're thinking, it's adorable, funny robot can do monkey tricks. And so it's down around that level. We're not really that concerned about it. We also have this impression that the difference in intelligence between the dumbest human and Einstein is this significant gap. When in reality, the real experience is that artificial intelligence is really moving up at this accelerated rate, and we think, oh, that's adorable. The funny robot can do monkey tricks, but in reality, at this rate that it's going, it's going to go zooming by, and the difference between a dumb human and Einstein on an intelligence scale is not really that significant. It's not as significant as we tend to think. So we have this misunderstanding of intelligence itself, which kind of skews our way of looking at this whole thing. Artificial intelligence, and it's also, we don't want to talk about, it's not a robot. It's not the robot, and it's not what the robot is just a container. The artificial intelligence, it's the software, it's the brain of what it's doing. It's all those types of things, and that's a huge difference. I mean, it can use robots as containers to do some of the things it wants to do, but it's really all about the software. It's about the brain. Narrow intelligence, which is already here. All right, we have examples of it. Cars, they have anti-lock brakes. They can tune the fuel injection. They become self-driving, which is a little more, which we would call like a robust artificial narrow intelligence self-driving, because it's doing multiple things. It's still all things that are associated with a car, but it's still doing more than just one thing. Smartphones, where we talked about how smartphones are an example of narrow intelligence. Email filters. This is another cool area where some of the things that go on in email filters that we want to talk about are the fact that they have been getting better and better, and some of the rules that it's using for email filters, it's done them in such a way, it's using different heuristics to where it's looking at because it can never recognize a new process. I mean, it can say, okay, this was an old, and I know that this particular address, when it sends emails, that it's junk. But when something's coming from a new spot, it has to be able to recognize patterns. And from these patterns, it has to be able to also make a pretty intelligent idea about whether it's, or guess, if you will, about whether the email filter, whether it's a junk mail or whether it's something that we might want to see. So it goes through a lot of logic to do that kind of stuff. And it's looking forward and backward, which is kind of neat. we talked about the networking of the ANI networking in Amazon and Facebook, where you go out on Amazon and you look up a product, and all of a sudden when you're on Facebook, you find that product is being advertised to you on Facebook, something that you did on Amazon. So that all of a sudden these narrow intelligence rule-based systems such as Amazon and Facebook are also starting to talk to each other. They're starting to put information in a way in which they can both share it and they both can start making sense out of it. Google Translate is a sign of a narrow intelligence of artificial intelligence, and it's getting better and better. And the neat thing about this kind of intelligence too is that it only has to solve the problem once, and then it's available all the time. It's not like when we're talking about sending all of our children to school to learn something, and then we have to have all the children in Russia go to school and they learn something, and then all the children in China, and everybody is learning at different paces, and everybody's learning something different. And ultimately, if we find one subject that we want everybody to learn, it takes us a long time. Well, in artificial network, in this what we're talking about here, once Google translates something and somebody says, well, no, that's wrong, here's what it really is, then Google, that'll be right for everybody that wants to use Google. I mean, it's not like it has to keep learning it for each single individual. However, it's kind of neat because it does have things that it can learn for a single individual. It can learn different ways that a single individual may say something. So those type of things. So it's kind of cool because it actually does both. Google search is a really classic example there, and we can get into. There's a whole lot of issues regarding artificial intelligence with regards to search engines and the early expert systems and what was going on, and the value that search engines bring is enormous with regards to what we used to have to do with expert systems. Because with expert systems, we had to know the parameters of what it was that somebody was talking about. With Google search, it's looking at the person who's doing the search as well as where they are. It's looking at all these other criteria in order to as well as what it is that they put in, as well as other times that they've used search engines, as well as other people that use search engines. So it's using a whole lot of that type of information, and it's making it, but it can do it so quickly that it really is it created a whole new paradigm for the artificial intelligence world. I mean, they were going in a whole different direction prior to what these search engines were able to bring forward. All the narrow intelligence, all the stuff, where planes can practically fly themselves, and they do in most cases. The pilots are just being used to help land them. And even then, they're just kind of putting their hands there in case there's a big problem. Games are full of artificial intelligence, and we already talked about the ability of the system to win at chess and to win at Go and to other areas. I mean, that's a big area for artificial intelligence. Single function task, which is why it's called narrow intelligence to begin with, like trading. I mean, we see it being used in trading, and I actually think that even narrow intelligence is going to change the whole paradigm for the idea of the market and how the market works, because everybody will have the intelligence available to them. It's just like everybody has the Google search engine available to them. Everybody will have that. So all of the trading will be all on an equal block. So it won't be because you know something different than somebody else, you actually will be able to trade better. And we've seen it's being used in manufacturing extensively and a lot of the robotics are tied to the artificial intelligence in manufacturing. And then in the military, it's extensive use in the military too. Basically, what it's talked about is it could do most things that require thinking, but not things without thinking. So the perception of 3D objects. So if you think about the idea of perception itself, that's an area which right now narrow intelligence has a big challenge with. It can memorize a whole bunch of objects and ultimately know what they are, but the idea of perception is an idea that it still doesn't grasp, and that's one of the ideas that leads us to AGI, which is a general intelligence, and we'll talk about that later. Some of the risk revolved around ANI, okay, is that the risks are we can see some isolated catastrophes could actually occur, like it could knock out a power grid. It could harmful nuclear power plant malfunction could be actually attributed to artificial narrow intelligence making a mistake or whatever. And it actually triggered the financial market disaster, the 2010 flash crash, where like $1 trillion worth of value was lost in a couple hours, a couple minutes, and but later they were able to get some of that back. But the point behind narrow intelligence is it's not perceived to actually be able to generate an existential threat. It is not able to eliminate life on Earth. All right, so it's isolated catastrophes, but not an existential threat from a risk perspective. Let's look at some of the limitations. Right, we had a presentation from a guy named Carl, and his presentations was on a affect with regards to biological cells. And you and I talked a little bit about this at lunch, and so I don't have to go into this a whole lot. But what we're talking about is that the idea that a cell can recognize that there is a danger is only because it has a memory of the fact that going close to fire is bad. I mean, whereas just a pure chemical can't do that. A pure chemical just rolls its way down into the fire and explodes or whatever. So the idea behind is that there has to exist memory that can affect behavior in biology. And so there's a limitation now with narrow AI on some of those things that need experience. All right, so that if you need experience in order to understand that fire is bad, and narrow AI has not done that. I mean, it's not gone through the millions of years of evolution that man has, and the billions of years that biology has, so that it doesn't have some of those things that are related to affect, which we can talk about. All right, and it has trouble putting together complex images into a picture. So if you look at that picture that we have there, where it would say, okay, that's two squares, one of which has is all black and the other is kind of striped. However, if you told it to look at a square picture of a rock, it would just call it angles and circles and it wouldn't be able to tell you that that's a rock. Now, once it has the experience of seeing that that's a rock, then it actually can do that, but it wouldn't be able to do that just naturally. So anything new, it wouldn't necessarily be able to do that with. And we can get back to that because we're talking about there are some ways that it actually has patterns it can do for something that's a totally new experience to it. The example again behind the picture on the left there is that if you really remove the black and you have all these other images, we right away can look at that and kind of get a feel for what that is. But to the computer, all that is just another set of angles and circles and other things. So it can't put that into a concept like we can. So some of the current limitations of narrow AI, right? Now, let's jump into general AI, okay? At some point in the future, in the not too far future, we will achieve general AI. And if you look at the exponential growth of computing there on the left or on the chart, you can see that we're getting close to the point of insect brain as far as calculations per second per $1,000 in terms of the computer. This is one of the rules that they use. All right, but if we're looking here at 2020, I mean, it looks, if you follow this graph, the year 2020, we'll have exceeded the mouse brain and heading towards the human brain. And then look how fast it moves to all human brains. All right. So AGI, it's a logarithmic plot. Anyway, the median expert prediction for when we will see AGI is 2040. And the median expert prediction for ASI is 2060. All right, so the expert predictions for AGI and ASI are certainly within the lifespan of every one of our children's and probably every one of our grandchildren and most of our children and even some of us. So this is not something that we can just put off. So why don't we see it coming? One of the reasons we don't see it coming is because we are standing here at the end of this. We're on this timeline, and we're looking at it, and we're looking at human progress, and we're seeing that human progress is getting significant. But we can only look back. We can't look forward. And so if where we are, if they're right, and we're on this, we're at the beginning of the hockey stick. We can't see that what's to the right of us. And so we don't see it coming, but but we can see patterns that lead us to believe that this is certainly one of our possible futures. The other issue that are perception challenges that we have is that there's what they call an S-curve wave of a new paradigm as it explodes into growth. So it explodes into growth, then it matures, explodes into growth, and then it matures. So when we're in one of these mature, what we see is when it gets into one of these mature states, it seems like we have this tendency to address it as, oh, everybody was wrong. Look, it's not getting anywhere now. It's not, because it's not constantly moving at the same pace that it was moving at originally when it did the big leap. We seem to think that it's kind of petered out and we're not going to see anything more. And that's the challenge. It is an S-curve wave. The whole idea of progress is an S-curve wave, and so we're going to have those peaks and valleys type of things. And so we have to be careful of where we are on that. In terms of us making decisions. And you hear a lot of people talk about, well, they said that expert systems were going to be, do something, and they don't, and it's been 20 years and stuff like that. Well, in reality, 20 years in the lifespan of mankind is a very, very, very small number. And on top of that, 20 years in terms of biology is infinitesimal. I mean, you couldn't. I don't know how many decimal points you'd have to go to do 20 years in relationship to our biology, or certainly even in relationship to humans. So we have a tendency to over-exaggerate how things aren't hitting what we thought they would hit when we give such limited dates to our predictions. So we have to be careful with our predictions and our perceptions. Okay, now let's talk about how we're actually making general AI, how we're going after and building general AI, right? And there's three ways that we're looking at making ANI smart enough to basically ultimately become AGI. One is we're going to polarize the brain, all right? And by 2030, it's expected that we'll be able to re-engineer the brain. We'll have all of the ways that the neurons and everything works, and we'll be able to actually re-engineer the brain. If we can re-engineer the brain, then we re-engineer it in terms that are algorithms, then all of those algorithms can ultimately be put into a program, which ultimately can be put into a computer, and so that it can actually can do what our brains do. Another is we can emulate evolution. So there's three paths that are going on simultaneously here. So there are some researchers that are emulating evolution. And so that they're saying, let's let the computer develop the best way for a machine to develop and not duplicate humans. I mean, this idea that it has to be able to do things the way our brain does them is not necessarily correct. A good analogy there is that, when we first made movies, we made movies that looked just like theater productions. So we would just take a camera and go to the theater and as they gave the play, somebody would sit there and use their camera to copy the play. Same thing you see in today in what they're doing with some of the education things. That's not really taking any advantage of the medium of the video itself. And so what we see is later when we see these same plays that are now done in using all of the different medium capabilities of a video system, it's a whole different experience. And so the idea is that I think we're stuck with this idea that we have to develop the machine the same way we developed humans, but yet that's not really a valid assumption, all right? And a lot of the things, evolution designs things, and it's pretty slow at stuff. I mean, because the evolution can't design for purpose. It can't look and say, ooh, it would be best if all of us had 3 arms. If everybody had 3 arms, we'd be able to do these things that we can't do today better, and therefore, we're going to give everybody 3 arms and see what happens. I mean, evolution, it doesn't work that way. I mean, but we can, all right, and the machine can. We can build machines to keep focusing on design for purpose. And a neat feature of that is we can take advantage of virtual reality by doing that. What that means is that with virtual reality, we can take advantage of. We don't have to. The machine doesn't have to actually implement it and see it fail or see it succeed and then continue. That it can actually run it in a virtual reality world and see how it reacts in the virtual reality world, and the virtual reality world will constantly get improved. And then based upon that, it can make decisions as far as whether it is actually able to attain the purpose and whether there's unintended consequences that are kind of would limit the advantage that you'd get out of designing that way. So it would change the design. So virtual reality gives the machine a playground where it can try things out without causing some substantial challenges to the Earth and everything else. All right, and then the third pattern that people talk about is make this the computer's problem and just teach the computers to architect themselves and let them go and see what they do. And there are people working in research and development in all 3 of these different areas with all different results. And so it's possible. So it's like no one knows which way is going to win, but they're all actually being developed. Some general principles, all right, that the idea that with intelligence comes power, all right. So there's that's one of the ideas that we can see if we look at history and at evolution, all right. And so there's a scenario that says, okay, so it takes us decades to get from ANI to AGI, and that AGI will only be able to understand the world as well as a 4-year-old. Then, 1 hour later, that system pumps out the grand theory of physics that unifies general relativity and quantum mechanics that no human can do yet. And then, 90 minutes later, AGI becomes ASI and is 170,000 times more intelligent than any human. This is a possible scenario of general AI and its relationship to ASI. Let's talk about why, all right? As you move up the intelligence quality, so we're not talking about intelligence speed, which tends to be some of the things that people focus on. We're talking about the quality of intelligence. So a problem that we see as being impossible all of a sudden becomes obvious with a small move up in intelligence quality, a very large move in intelligence quality, and then you actually get to a point where all problems that we see today have obvious solutions. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about general AI gets to the point where it looks at all problems they all have obvious solutions. And therefore, it's not essential that the AGI does things in a very slow fashion, because if it moves that quickly up the intelligence quality, and we'll see our little intelligence quality ladder later, it's a phenomenal as to what it could do. Here it is. All right. So if you look here and you say, okay, if it's somewhere between an insect and a chicken, all right, it's down here, the intelligence staircase. So there's where the insect is, and you go up, intelligence, you go up a number of steps, you get to the chicken, you go up a couple more steps, you get to the chimp, and you go up a couple more steps, and you get to human. All right. And so that's the intelligence staircase. The interesting thing, though, is with the idea of ASI, of superintelligence, is that this round down here represents this whole chart to the left is all represented here, and ASI is way up here. I mean, the number of steps different is absolutely phenomenal. And so, it gets to be where you're saying, if you already consider that somewhere down in the middle of this chart, that all things that we perceive today as problems are all obvious with obvious solutions to the superintelligence, it then ends up with its own direction as to how many, it'll solve those problems and then keep moving on. So it's going to, it's now going to go after the universe. The risk, of course, are that with ASI, the risks actually do become existential risks. An ASI gone rampant could actually eliminate a mankind, and that may be the ultimate experience that we get from ASI. So we have to recognize that the risks of ASI are substantial. My challenge is I don't think that there's any way to stop any one of those three developments that we talked about, and no less all three of them. And so I think our options are that we're going to get there whether we like it or not, and we're just going to have to face it and see what we can do with it. Now let's look at the potential rewards. If you look at the extinction chart, right, the life's balance beam, all right, all species have a trajectory in the life's balance beam where they're around for a while and ultimately they fall off the balance beam and go into extinction. And it's true of every species. There's 99.9999% of all the species in the world that's their only trajectory that they can look at. However, one of the potential rewards of ASI is actually it can drive us to immortality. It can bring us off the other side of the balance beam to where we basically are able to realize immortality. And so the reward is absolutely phenomenal. Because if you look at it, I don't think that there's, we had some presentations from many, many different people, and there's nobody that I know of who doesn't believe that ultimately man is facing an extinction some way or another. But so the the outcome, if there's no ASI, is ultimately we will experience extinction. However, with ASI, there's two likely outcomes. One is extinction and the other is immortality. And so it seems to be the better bet, kind of is the way we're looking at this, or at least the way I'm looking at this. Right? Now, some of the options that people talk about when they think ASI is going to arrive, the main camp thinks that ASI will probably happen within the 21st century, and it will probably make a huge impact when it happens. That's the main camp of the world's great scientists and thinkers. There's other less common camps that they think that ASI won't happen in this century. ASI will never happen, and when ASI happens, it won't make that big of an impact. However, this is the current position with regard to ASI. If we look a little bit more at that main camp, the way they look at it from a pessimism versus optimism perspective, the larger group exist in this anxious alley or anxious avenue area, where they're a little bit concerned that it's going to happen almost definitely soon, but that they're uncertain if it could be very good or very bad, and they're worried that it's more likely to be bad than good. But there's none of them that are actually panicked, right? There's a few that are optimists and some that are giddy. So it seems like most of them, the large percentage of them are in this worried and uncertain state, and a number of them are at the giddy state, all right, that almost definitely will be very good. So that's kind of where we see this going. And that's kind of the what we're going to talk about here, all right? And so that's, what we're going to summarize too is that, presentation that we're going to give here on artificial intelligence, and the idea is it's AI through superintelligence, and should we be very afraid? So anyway, that's what I'm going to talk to them about. I thought I'd give you an update on it. Thanks.